This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
Welcome, heralds and sages, to another episode of Fantology. This is your host, Ryan, joined by Josh, my cousin and friend, and we are here to discuss two more books in Cradle. They are books 9, Bloodline, and 10, Reaper. To recap, I have read these probably about 6 months ago now, and Josh just finished them, I don't know, maybe a month ago, a couple weeks.
Yeah, a couple weeks.
Weeks. Okay, so I think for these episodes, given the duration of time that has passed since I've read it, I think Josh, maybe you should lead some of these topics of conversation since they're a bit fresher in your mind.
Wow. Okay. All right. I can do that, I think, hopefully. I still get lost in some of the details, I think, especially This is the longest gap I think we've had between me finishing the book and us recording an episode, just the way it's worked out. But yeah, I think we can do that. These books have been good. Overall, and should we do overall impressions, I guess, for this kind of set of books first?
Overall impressions and maybe spoiler-free thoughts. We usually do a spoiler-free section.
Yeah, so spoiler-free, continuing to be solid entries. I do think that, like what you were saying with, I'm forgetting which numbers, but kind of the tournament books.
Those are 7 and 8, right?
Yeah, or 6 and 7, 7 and 8. I think 7 and 8. I think those so far have been my favorite entries. I think that they just have a lot of character development, a lot of interesting scenarios. The pacing is really well done. So I think that those are still at the top of my list for this series. But I think that this has done a really good job. And like going back to the conflict that was promised at the start of the series, with dealing with the Dread Gods and dealing with Sacred Valley and helping his family, and also fulfilling a lot of things that have been foreshadowed with the future of kind of like even the whole universe, and kind of paying off some of the things that we got foreshadowed with the Abaddon and the judges and stuff. So I think that this is juggling a lot, and it's doing so in a really, really well. Sometimes maybe at the hindrance a little bit of like of pacing and character development, but it needs to be done, and it's doing a good job of it. So there's my overall thoughts.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you in that the Uncrowned King tournament is a pretty good highlight of the series so far. I mean, it's hard to beat. There's just so much action. We see a lot of our different characters in cool different fights, and we see them develop their abilities significantly and just be tested in cool and new ways. And that being said, I still really like these books, 9 and 10. They're a lot more focused on like expanding the conflict. I guess all of them are really each book expands the conflict greater and greater, but now we're getting even more involved with the Abaddon, which is something I want to talk about when we get more into the spoilers. And that's something that personally was pretty cool for me and exciting, just bringing that into the story more and more. So even though I might not rate it quite as high as Uncrowned King tournament, and I guess it's Uncrowned and Wintersteel, I think, are the names of the two books. I think that it's close. It's close to those for me.
I'd agree. Yeah. I think I was a little bit less invested in the Abaddon storyline. Just, it's a little hard for me to get into those more nebulous kind of big powerful beings at war.
Well, let's get into spoilers.
But
we can talk more about this, because honestly, this is kind of what I wanted to open up. So if you're listening and you haven't read these books, then definitely turn it off if you don't want things to be spoiled for you.
Yeah, and if for whatever reason you're up to these books and you're like thinking, "Oh, should I go on?" Like obviously, yes, you should go on. Like
Yeah.
these are good books. Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah. All right. Spoilers start now. So, in your last review, I remember we had talked about how the Abaddon conflict had still kind of remained, or this chapters in which we have like following Surreal or other judges. They just kind of felt, I don't know, separated from the main story, and you weren't really invested in them. But um I think a little bit in Bloodline, a lot in Reaper. That changes. So have you changed your mind at all, or your
Yeah, I
opinion?
mean, yeah, so not to like I was pretty sure that that Ethan was going to be one of the judges, was going to be Azrael. Like I
Okay,
don't know if I
at
ever
what
like
point were
texted you
you?
that. Um I think like for a while. I think
Yeah.
for the last like few books probably, like when he really started going on about how he like really knew things about the way, and like, you know, it just so I can't remember if that was like the book before or two books before, but like he definitely knew more than he should have, even if he had been tutored by, you know, whatever
Tiberius Aurelius.
Tiberius. Yeah. Like he still knew way more than he should have known. And so I think that kind of tipped the hand. And just like the fact that he had um he had the the bloodline stone thing, you know.
Yeah.
Um my other guess, which was kind of more out there, was that Lyndon himself was like reborn, like when it was Azrael like reborn or something.
Yeah,
Um
he had like locked his memories,
yeah.
or
So
yeah.
those are kind of, you know, far, you know, pretty different guesses. So I'm not like saying, oh, I predicted everything, but
Yeah.
like it seemed like they were really foreshadowing that, like, oh, where's Azrael? Where's Azrael? Where's Azrael? And then like, oh,
Uh-huh.
you know, like obviously somebody we're following is Azrael, was my
Yeah.
thought. But yeah.
Yeah. I
But it
I
does make
think,
me a lot more invested in it, obviously, because I have really liked Ethan as a character. So now I'm like kind of want to go back and reread all of those uh
yeah.
sections.
I
Yeah.
I liked I probably started to suspect in these books, especially more when they were going through the labyrinth and you learn more about the life of Azrael. Although Azrael as a character seemed quite different from Ethan.
Kind of. I mean, you get like the fact that he started like the path, not the path, the like janitor path thing, you know, like with the broom and the shears and stuff.
Oh
And
yeah, that's
at
true.
first I was kind of confused. I was like, oh, is this talking about Ethan? And then I was like, oh no, it's talking about Azrael. And
Uh-huh.
so that was one of those times when it yeah.
Okay. So you but when you were kind of doing your spoiler free section, you did say that the Abidan section still remained a bit nebulous to you. So would you say you like them more, but still not as much as you think
So
you
when I,
should?
yeah, when I said that they were starting to pay off things
Okay.
that they had set up with the Abaddon section, like that's what I was referring to. Um but I think that they still need to do more to really make me now care. And I will say I've gotten a few chapters in, and it seems like they are focus into book 11, bringing
Yeah.
uh
Book
into
11
Dread
is
God.
that Dread God? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I've gotten a few chapters into Dread God, and it's already open, like with Azrael, you know, like being with Ethan being there,
With
and still,
Ethan's viewpoints.
yeah, and still kind of being Ethan, but like now you get like a different side of him, you know.
Yeah.
And so I guess just it seems like they're going to keep, you know, that your care for Ethan is going to be really what invests you into now the whole Abaddon plot line, which
Yeah.
I think is needed. And yeah, so that's where I'm at with it.
Okay. Well, let's get into Bloodline and start talking about some of the key events um that you found interesting or noteworthy.
So Bloodline is book 9,
9.
right? So
Yes.
I've kind of in my head, I've kind of started to think about this as like four different trilogies in a sense.
Okay.
Like, one, two, three were kind of like Lyndon growing. I don't know if it really breaks down, but like kind of book 9 was like the ending of, it felt like a lot the ending of Lyndon's, he achieved all the goals he had set out to achieve, in the sense
Right.
that he had
He
saved
defended or
yeah
saved Sacred Valley from
the Dread
the
God.
Dread
Yeah,
gods, right? There are
yeah,
multiple Dread gods that ended up.
the Bleeding Phoenix. Yeah, or
Um,
Bloody Phoenix. Yeah. And he had, and not only that, but he had like, come full circle with his family. He had become like the
mhm,
master of, he had started this new path. He had mastered a lot of the sacred arts. He had gotten, him and Yaren seem like they're like pretty much now, like completely loyal to each other, and for the most part like romantically involved. Like kind of all of this was wrapped up by like the ending of book 9, you know.
yeah.
um so
But it
it
also
kind of, yeah,
introduces, I guess at the end, it introduces a greater threat.
yeah. So now it's like, now it seems like we're moving into like the final trilogy, book 10, 11, and 12, of like, okay,
Yeah.
how are we gonna like do this this universe spanning threat, of like the
Uh-huh.
Reaper, and all of
Right.
these other issues that I'm still a little bit, trying to
So
figure out.
what do you think about in book in Bloodline we learn a lot more about this labyrinth and about this additional dread god, or the original dread god, I guess, who's kind of the source of hunger Madra. So I mean, much of this book is really Lyndon's quest through the labyrinth. How'd you
Yeah,
like that?
I think again, I go back to talking about the first book, how Will Wight does such a good job at creating um these like specific settings. We go back to like book 1, with that being Sacred Valley. Was it book 2 or 3 where they had the like training course set up, where they spent like the entire time in the training
That was
course,
book
right?
3, I think,
Book
Black
3.
Flame. Yeah.
And then you get like the whole part of the world where they get dross, like the, shoot, I'm forgetting all the like names of these things, but where they're in like the pocket dimension thing, uh
Ghostwater. Yeah.
Ghostwater. Like he does such a good job at all these these like kind of smaller scale settings that he sets up, and this was no
Uh-huh.
exception. I think that the labyrinth, definitely, you felt kind of claustrophobic the entire book, in like a good way, and like a feeling like, oh man, like I don't know what's around the next corner. I don't know if
Yeah.
they're going to be able to get out. You get a restriction on their resources, so you really felt like they were having to conserve. It's taking kind of these people that are now almost the top power level in the world, and like restricting their resources and making them conserve how they do it.
Hmm.
That there's like the threat from the outside, like this war building kind of right above their heads. And so I thought that this was all like very, very well done. The labyrinth, and I think that the setting is really what allowed that to all be done so well.
And it talks about it explains a lot about the suppression field, right? Around Sacred Valley, which is or was this in book 8?
I think in book 8 it did kind of explain it, but I wasn't too interested. It explained it, but more so for book 8, it was that Yaren, it was like kind of really exploiting Yaren's like quick ascension to being a herald, because,
Yeah,
so that
she
was
was
kind of,
weakened by the suppression field even more.
yeah, it felt like it was always in reference to Yaren being weakened, is all the explanations we
Yeah.
got. Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember, why exactly did they set up this suppression field? Was it to prevent the other dread gods from making it back to the first dread god? What do
For,
they call him?
uh, shoot, the not the it's like not the original, but it's like, for some synonym.
Subject one.
Subject one, yeah. I think because subject one like was the kind of tethering their life force or something, right?
Yeah. Well, the anchor. It was the anchor, and in order to defeat them, they needed to defeat subject one, something along those lines.
Yeah, something along those lines. It was all, and I do get a little bit lost in the weeds of kind of that history of what the importance behind subject one is, and all of that. At some level,
Yeah.
it does kind of seem like it's a MacGuffin type thing where it's like, oh, we need to get to the end so that we can get to the end and get this thing / find this knowledge out. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't all done really well throughout getting there. It was I think I'd go as far as to say it's like one of the best maze labyrinth type settings I've really read before.
Yeah, I can't really think of like a modern day maze labyrinth
Well, like
that I've read.
like
that
Harry
I'm
Potter. Harry Potter has one in there. Like you get
and the Goblet of Fire.
the Goblet of Fire. Like Maze Runner
Okay.
has it, but
Yeah.
I think I just saw a few of those movies. It's like definitely a trope, and you can think of like Zelda has the mazes and labyrinths and stuff, and
Yeah, so I think I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I was just saying that I've read. You bring up some good examples though. I think that I liked your point because Will Wight has created a world that is very accessible in different levels. I think it's great for maybe a bit more of what you and I are leaning towards, which is just like kind of a fun action-packed story with like cool characters, awesome like abilities, like these paths that they that each character follows that can be unique and different. But also there's a lot of depth to the world, which is I think surprising given these books, the lengths of them. I mean, they're not particularly long books, so it's not like you're reading 1200 plus page Stormlight Archive books in order to get you still can't quite get the level of depth that you can get in those, of course. You just don't have the time, but I don't think that it's lacking significantly here if you choose to look deep at these and make I like subject one at Dread Gods, at the connection between them and the monarchs and the Abaddon. Like you can see all that stuff. It's there.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of I'm trusting that the depth is there. You know what I mean? Like I haven't really gone diving deep on the wikis and everything to really get that depth for myself. Like to really I still feel like I just trust what Will Wight says will work. You know what I mean? Like there's not that kind of leading me to like, oh, how is Lyndon going to use the magic system to figure this out? It's just like he just does. I'm sure that there are people that are that level of into it and like really trying to like know exactly everything that the magic system.
Well, I don't think it's supposed to be that type of magic system where you could have like a manual written based on what the context the author has given and how different abilities work. There's too much for it to be written in such a way. But that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work or it's not magical in its own sense.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing I was thinking with the map, and forgive me, you can tell that Tears of the Kingdom came out recently, but it does kind of feel, and this isn't really a criticism, it's just more of an observation, but it does kind of feel like the map is kind of just like an overworld type map. And like they just kind of like go between like they kind of fly over it, right? And then like they're in like different settings. Like I never really for most of the settings besides these specific places, I never really could tell you like, oh, is it like foresty? Is there like a lot of nature? Is it like a desert? Is it an ocean, like a seaside type place? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just kind of feels like until you get into a setting like this, Labyrinth is a good example. It's kind of generic feeling like you don't really feel like where they're at versus something like Wheel of Time where like you feel like you can picture the exact setting and the exact feel of every village and every town that they go to, and you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
there's just, it's kind of different feeling in that sense. So
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's how I read. I'm not necessarily trying to picture the setting as much. I'm not thinking about all of the different details on the walls and what everybody's wearing and the fabric and how they're moving their hands. Um, so, I mean, there are certain people who probably really like to have that picture painted in their mind, and these books might not be for them. But now that you bring up Tears of the Kingdom, it's kind of it's a little funny. Spoilers for the very, very beginning of Tears of the Kingdom. Like literally the first 10 or 15 minutes of the game. But Link's arm is replaced
that's
with
true.
the arm of like this, this previously past like being of some magical ability, and it's similar to this where Lyndon has his arm replaced, so that's kind of a funny little connection.
That's true. It is, you do see a lot of these type of kind of similarities where Link just goes around and powers up and powers up and powers up until he's like the most powerful thing in the world and can
Yeah.
just kind of one shot most enemies.
Uh-huh.
But so it's kind of fun. Anyway, but yeah, what I okay, the other thing I really liked about this book is I feel like we've had Lyndon, Yaren, and Ethan have been strong. Like I've really enjoyed all three of their characters. Having
Yeah,
said that, I feel like the other side characters in the series haven't been as strong up until this point. I
like
think that this
Mercy
book,
and Zeal.
yeah, I think that this book, Zeal kind of came out of nowhere for me. I feel like Will Wight kind of knew that he needed one more character in there. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
and so I feel like now being in this confined place, and characters like Dross and Little Blue and Orthos, they stuck around and have done, had interesting things happen with them and everything. But I feel like those non-human characters are kind of harder to relate to in a lot of ways than human characters, right? So I think that
Isn't
Mercy,
Mercy human?
yeah, I was meaning like Orthos and
Okay.
Dross,
Okay. Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
they would be like considered secondary characters and stuff, but like they aren't really human, so they're harder to relate to. But
Okay. Makes sense.
Mercy and Zeal, um, I think were needed additions to this found family type approach that they're going for in the series, and I,
Yeah.
I really appreciated that. And it's moving forward to like, okay, now there's a conflict with Mercy and like her family, her loyalties to her family, her loyalties um to Ethan and to Lyndon and stuff. So I think that those additions to this book and making them kind of front and center in this book as well really helped it.
I mean, that's why it's called Bloodline, right? I mean, that's, or maybe
Yeah.
not the whole reason, but
I
that's
well, I
part
think
of it.
Bloodline was, because I think we've kind of skipped ahead. We didn't talk a whole lot about Bloodline, right? We kind of skipped over most of. I mean, I'm sorry, I've been more thinking about like the labyrinth and everything from
Okay. Well,
but
so the ending of Bloodline by Will Wight, I think, ends with Lyndon basically winning control of the labyrinth over, like, Reagan Shen is trying to control the labyrinth, and Lyndon
yeah,
basically wins control of it.
yeah. Sorry, I was also thinking about the book number 9 though.
Wait, that
Is
is that is book number 9, Bloodline. Reaper is book 10.
Yeah, Reaper is book 10, Bloodline is book 9. You're right.
Yeah, but I'm trying to. Yeah, I think that's the end of Bloodline. Whereas book, yeah, so um Reaper is more like Reagan Shen and the Monarchs are suddenly like threatened by Lyndon and his control of the labyrinth.
Yeah. Well, okay. So sorry. Book. Um. So in Bloodline, that's when they evacuate Sacred Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and
So
then
that is
and
Lyndon
Reaper.
kind of fulfilling, like you said, finishing up, his main goal, which was basically to save Sacred Valley from the Dread God.
Right. And I
Okay.
wasn't really thinking like I know that Mercy and Zeal do have roles to play in that, but they weren't super interesting. But let's talk a little bit about Bloodline, because that was interesting when Lyndon does come back and really faces his family and everything. I did
Uh-huh.
want to talk about that. What was that satisfying to you, or what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, he basically comes and kicks butt, right? Like you expect him to, but he isn't able to do it for as long as had wished, right? Because of the suppression field, and he basically loses his Madra and isn't able to regenerate it.
Yeah, I think that so it was interesting as a reader, because you do have a lot of pages between the beginning of the series and this point in the series, right? And so you kind of saw this kind of abusive environment that Lyndon was growing up, right? Like you could tell his, family kind of cared about him, but also like they not a ton, you know what I mean? Like they weren't really going out of their way to like protect him, right? They
Yeah.
were more interested about preserving their honor than like protecting Lyndon.
Yeah, they were kind of putting all their eggs in the basket of like there's this his sister, because she showed she wasn't an unsold.
Yeah, right. And so you get you kind of get this feeling that this isn't a great environment for Lyndon, and then you know you go throughout the series, and then you're like, well, the world is kind of messed up here, right? Like this, you would probably see the same thing happening in other places in the world, but
Yeah.
other places do seem like they are a little bit more understanding of people that aren't just like amazing at the sacred arts, right? Like there does seem to be a lot of places where like people can just live their life normal, right? Without like these huge pressures to be amazing at the sacred arts.
Well, I mean, yeah, there would have to be, right? But we don't necessarily see those that much, because Lyndon is kind of like in the path of the sacred arts, trying to be the best that ever was. So we're kind of seeing him compete with
Yeah,
all the sacred artists.
but I feel like we do see like kind of walking through some towns and villages. Like we do get some descriptions of people like talking about how not very many people actually study like the warrior arts. You know what I mean? Like most people just like kind of study the sacred arts and in the sense that it like can help their lives. You know what I mean? Without
Yeah.
like necessarily becoming the anyway.
Yeah.
My point is that like most other places in the world, it seems like Lyndon would have probably been able to like live a much happier like life than he was in Sacred Valley. And
Uh-huh.
so when we come back to really see that, dang, that really is the case, that like even now that he's like super powerful, they're still treating him like garbage, was pretty
And he's like trying to help them too.
yeah, and he's like treating them like with kid gloves, right? That was all pretty satisfying. And then like when he goes to the elder, or what, like the first elder or whatever, and he like counts how many times he could have killed him in like 2 seconds. That was super cool. That was a nice little scene. So
Yeah.
I don't know, I just think that there are a lot of these like kind of cool homages and payoffs to what we got in book one in Bloodline.
That is one of like when it's done well, it's like one of my favorite things, where the main character is like leaves on their journey and becomes like significantly more powerful, and then returns to where they originated from, and a lot of times they're like not even recognized because they're just so different and
Yeah,
so
I did think that
powerful.
they still, it was interesting that they still had so much even like hatred and like animosity for Lyndon. I
Yeah.
mean, the other, kind of example that you would draw to this book, which I'm not going to say it, but like, well, the other, you get kind of moments like this in the Wheel of Time, right? I'm not going to spoil it because like I don't want to spoil, but like you get a similar moment kind of to this. I don't know if you
I
know
think
anything.
I think I yeah, I
You
think I
think
know.
but like at least with that one, like there was still like love there, you know what I mean? Like there was maybe some refusal to accept like how far, that character had come, but like there's still like love. Versus this one, there's just like animosity and like hatred and contempt for Lyndon,
Yeah.
which was so interesting because it seemed like all they cared about was power, but no, what they cared about was their power structure. And when somebody went out their power structure and became, way more powerful than anybody in
Uh-huh.
that structure, they immediately denied it.
Right. He was an unsold, and in their minds, unsold never like amounted to anything.
Yeah.
Like it just defied their worldview. You see the same thing with people today. Like if something does not fit into their worldview, they need to figure out a way in which to
You
kind of
legitimize it.
yeah, to legitimize it. And yeah, you did sorry, my cat really wants attention right now. You did bring up a good point where it was so frustrating to see like how Lyndon was treated in these instances, and how he was basically like, because they kind of go along with him and then they just like stab him in the back and betray him because they're just like, no, this guy, he's not trying to help us. Like he's like us, right? He if he was so powerful, he would just like take control, or I
Or
can't
destroy
figure.
us even.
Yeah,
Like
or
I
destroy
think,
it. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and it was interesting that like almost caused the destruction of their entire clan, right?
Uh-huh.
Like it almost prevented them from
Well, didn't it
getting
prevent like a
evacuated.
lot of people from being evacuated?
Well, if I remember right, like a lot of people did die, but then they were kind of like saying, Lyndon, oh, look, Lyndon, look how many people you did save. But that's when he was like, no, we're going to go fight. We're actually going to go fight the dread gods.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think
Oh,
that they
okay.
did save most people because they went out and actually like, Lyndon was like, oh, I refuse to accept that many people are still going to die, even though I did save like a good amount.
Yeah.
He was like, oh no. And so they went and fought.
And then there was also that one clan who it was like the clan that wears like the iron armor, right? That like they just kind of followed Lyndon without like,
It was Zeal. That was Zeal.
oh, they followed Zeal without like much fight. They were like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
We'll just go along with this.
That scene was really funny with the kid sitting on top of Zeal's head. That was the standout scene. You probably don't remember it,
I
but
don't
I thought it
remember it.
was Zeal was in. He's kind of like, I always pictured Zeal as kind of like, a little bit tipsy, a little bit drunk, like just kind of aloof to a lot of things. And then so he kind of goes in and like meets with the village elder, and he like lets them put on this like shackle that supposedly is like gonna bring him, hurt his ability to like use the sacred arts and stuff. And then like he senses this person sneaking up on him. He's like, oh, what are they gonna try now? And it's like their little like 3-year-old kid, and the kid like climbs up and sits on top of his head for the conversation. I don't know. It was funny. Like I
Yeah.
appreciate those kind of like
Somebody who
lively
has a
moments.
3-year-old.
Yeah, yeah. Like yes, that honestly seems like Will White's kid like just came and wouldn't let it like just I don't know if
Yeah.
he has kids or what, like if he's even married or anything, but like
Yeah.
it just seems like his kid came into his lap and wouldn't let him keep typing, so he like wrote that scene. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
It was cute, and I appreciate those moments.
Yeah. Um, we don't necessarily one comment I remember we got on our Discord is that we didn't really discuss like bloopers. And I think the reason is because like I read the bloopers and I kind of get like I enjoy them, but like in the moment, but then I don't really remember them after I read them initially.
Yeah, the bloopers, it's a fun concept to me, and but I'll read them, but sometimes I'll like honestly before when I've like finished the book, unless like if I'm doing something, like if I need to go do something and it's just the bloopers, like I
Yeah.
don't finish them all the time. Like I'll kind of just like move on. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Um, I think that's one of the things about having all the books available to me, that like, maybe instead of reading the bloopers, if I have like 30, like 20 minutes, then I might just want to get in and make it through the intro of the next book. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
but
think
it's a fun concept.
yeah, it's new. I think it's great. I think it would be something that might not be fun if like every author did it, but I think
Yeah.
that it's like Will Wight's one of his things.
And especially because the series isn't taking itself too seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a serious series, and I enjoy it. But like, if you had even a series like the First Law, which again, I'm not saying that the First Law does take itself too seriously, but like, it wouldn't fit in a series like the First Law, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
I don't think, at least, or like Game of Thrones, like
I don't
you're not.
know. I don't know, man. Bloopers in the First Law would probably be hilarious.
They would be
Just because of how like tongue in cheek
no,
Joe
Abercrombie would do an
Abercrombie's
amazing job with
humor.
them. I feel like I would want like a blog post of the bloopers. I but it would just be like gruesome deaths in the funniest, most
Yeah.
ridiculous ways.
Yeah. So let's move on to Reaper. Um and Reaper is basically, like I said earlier, so Lyndon now has control of the labyrinth, and the monarchs are suddenly like he's a threat to them because of how powerful he's become. And so that this is like, I don't know, something that I didn't really expect to happen this early. Um, is that he would be on par with monarchs.
So I
So,
think go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, what do you think about the shifting power dynamic here?
I think it's personally, I think it's needed in some sense. Like, I think that I don't want to wait until the last like 50 pages of the book of like this whole 12 book series to see Lyndon like become OP. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, I feel like I do kind of want that, especially because he's not even fighting. The thing is, like, the monarchs, kind of get the sense that that's not like what he's really worried about. Like, I think we're gonna get book 11. I think we'll be taking care of the monarchs. You've read it. I'm still reading it, but like at the ending of book 10, I felt like, okay, book 11, hopefully he'll finish up like with the monarchs, deal with the situation on Cradle, but then they're really gonna have to go deal with like the whole Abaddon conflict and trying to figure out, the what's his face,
Karuman,
yeah,
the Mad
anyway,
King.
the Mad King, yeah, figure all that out. And so that's more of his like rivals now that I see him. Like, okay, now he's like needs to go, get on level with Ethan. And um I think, to me, I feel like Lyndon almost has the power of like a dread god, right? Like, that's kind of what he kind of came away with the labyrinth of, like the subject one, like getting most of subject one powers and everything.
Yeah,
And you do get the idea that the monarchs are kind of all on power on level with the dread gods, in the sense that like if they really wanted to, like a monarch could probably take out dread god, but then it would like, you know
I don't know. Could they? It seems like if they really like, it seems like they could maybe fight them to a standstill.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, that's why they're like probably on like a power, they're on equal footing with it, like a dread god
Yeah.
could probably take out a monarch too, but like
Uh-huh.
it seems like they're kind of balancing each other out.
Yeah. Um,
So
one thing we learn in Reaper is, so at the very beginning of Reaper, Akura Fury, he has just become a monarch at the end of book 8, and now he's like suddenly leaving. When I first read that, I was like, oh, this is kind of, it seems like almost just them writing him out of the story because suddenly the power was so much in favor of the
the Furies,
yeah,
or the Akira.
the Kura clan, because now they have two monarchs and they just killed Sesheth Kunaz. So it's like they yeah, they could just, it seemed like just an author's way of balancing the scales, but there's actually a reason for it. Um, did they talk about this reason in, I don't want to spoil anything. Did they talk about this in book in Reaper?
Yeah, I think so. That
Okay.
that they, because I think he swear. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this happens in Reaper. I think maybe we shouldn't
Well,
spoil it just in case. But yes, I know
okay.
what you're talking about.
Okay. Um, and Reaper, we learn, in this book.
I feel like we're subjected to the same oath that Lyndon's subjected to, that we can talk around it but don't want to say it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. That is an oath. Like, it's the Yeah, the secret that they're not allowed to reveal to anybody.
Yeah.
Um, so in this book, where we find out a lot about Osriel, who is obviously Ethan, and his story, and so I thought that was kind of cool. He basically becomes like this, he's peerless. He like without peer, like genius, master of the sacred arts, and he's also like, inventor. There's pretty much nothing he can't do. Um, and I thought it was pretty cool to learn more about Osriel and his background. It wasn't something that I was expecting, in book one.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even meet Ethan until like book 3, right? 2 or
Well,
3.
yeah, but I mean, you learn about Osriel in book one, right?
Oh yeah,
Because
that's true.
Suriel, I think, is looking for Osriel. You know that he's missing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, I think that this is one thing where I do wish I would have been paying a little bit more attention to these things. And like, I guess I just didn't really care too much about Osriel.
Yeah.
Um, like I didn't know, and I think that this is kind of on purpose, but like I didn't really know if he was like actually a good guy or actually a bad guy, or like how much we should really um I guess care about him. But yeah.
I mean, from the way that he was initially described, he didn't like seem like so much a good person. Like he seemed kind of, just like, a really powerful person.
I guess that's a good point. Yeah.
But I think I liked it a lot because it gives us like so much perspective on, like, based on how Ethan is now. It's like, um I think that Osriel kind of, Ethan was, even though he could do like so much stuff, he was like, he's just been waiting so long for somebody to kind of come be his peer, maybe even his friend, and like that didn't necessarily happen. And I think he's lonely, right?
Yeah.
And he just like really wants some friends who are kind of on the same level as him. And he's like, you know what, if people can't do it themselves, I'm gonna have to go back and help them get to my level.
Yeah. Which
So
is, yeah, it does seem like a pretty lonely place to be. It's,
yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, I guess we also find out about like Darumon. I don't, maybe this was another kind of one of Osriel's failed attempts, but he tried to make the executors, right? These are the people that they made to be like kind of a level below the judges, and to go act on their own will, and to like solve problems in lots of different places. Am I remembering that right? But they all sort of they became corrupted.
Yeah. I seem to remember something about this, but I'm not exactly sure. I don't want to give misinformation
So
about this one.
the important thing to remember is that Darumont was like the last one of these that was uncorrupted, but then fought this fiend, and then they were worried he would become corrupted, so they locked him away, and then he ended up. I don't know. I think I was a bit more interested in this stuff than you were,
A
which is
little bit, yeah.
fine. I
Yeah.
think it's probably good to get different perspectives here on who liked what.
Yeah. This is really one I do tend to check out kind of in these more meta conversations about these kind of things. Nothing that it's bad, it's just not really my cup of tea. I think this is why it was hard for me to really get into Malazan. Like I read the first 2.5 of Malazan, and then I kind of just tapped out because
So it'll be
survive.
interesting to see how our opinions differ going into both Waybound and, or I mean, Dread God, you reading Dread God, and then Waybound, because I mean, I like this stuff maybe a little bit more than you, So and it's becoming more and more incorporated into the story. I mean, Waybound is probably going to be. We've learned that. Well, actually, I'm not sure. That might be a Dread God thing, so I'm not going to talk about it. But I assume that it's just going to be very, very heavy, especially in book 12. So
which I'm fine with. I'm to the point where I do want that.
okay.
So for what it's worth, I think that
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely earned that, and I'd be to the point where I'd probably go back and try and find a snippet or something of somebody like putting together all the chapter or all those like sections and just going back and reading those, because I do think that I am now interested in what's going on with those.
Yeah. Okay. Well, was there any other points to either book, Reaper or Bloodline, that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, we kind of did those a little bit out of order because we talked a lot about like the labyrinth and the cool setting and everything like that, and then we went
Well,
back.
well,
But
the labyrinth was Reaper, or no, it was Bloodline.
the labyrinth was Bloodline. No, the labyrinth was Reaper.
Okay, all right.
But
I
yeah,
was very confused on that.
yeah. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I think that there, yeah, really, what I really want to hammer home is that now I think that he stepped up the level of just being that the side characters are adequate to now the side characters are a are like a feature. You know what I mean? Like I really like
Yeah,
him, and I'm actually care what's going to happen with like Mercy, and I want like that to work out, not in terms of like them having a relationship like romantically or whatever, but like in terms of I care about what happens to her. Same thing with Zeal. You know what I mean? Like I feel like these characters are where Yaren was at, maybe at like book 3, where I'm like, okay, like, you know, hopefully like I like
yeah.
her, hopefully she sticks around. But um so anyway, so I'm happy that that's really been stepped up. I did like kind of Dross's arc of changing, you know, kind of sacrificing himself and then going into like these different stages of Dross. And so I think that has been well done.
Uh-huh.
And because
Yeah, we
I
haven't
feel like,
really talked
yeah,
about Dross at all.
yeah, that was one of those things like, okay, now we actually have some stakes, because again, like it's still kind of a criticism is that like, it doesn't really feel like these books have too much stakes in the sense that like, I don't think Yaren's going to die and like, or Lyndon's going to die, or, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so Dross was one of those characters that I think that he needed to take some chances on, and that I think it's worked out well. Um. Anyway, yeah.
All right. Well, just one more book for you to go until you're ready for Waybound, which comes out in June, I believe, or maybe is it July? Let's see.
Yeah. Let's do a check on that.
June 6th, 2023.
Dude, that's like
So
2 weeks,
that's
3 weeks.
yeah, 3 weeks.
Heck yeah.
All right. So you'll be you'll probably
I'll,
be caught up right before it comes out.
oh yeah, yeah. I am. Let me check where I'm at with in Dread God. I'm in chapter. Am I that far? I might almost be done with Dread God. Shoot.
Oh wow.
Okay. Yeah, I'm almost caught up.
You were like, I read a few chapters into Dread
So
God.
okay, full disclosure, I was listening to it while I was doing Breath of the Wild
Oh
or
wow.
Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, because that's kind of how I like to do it. Is you know, like I'll pause it if I'm doing like a shrine or something that like needs my attention. But while I'm just kind of like exploring, it's kind of fun to have a book in. So I think
You're
I played like
you're like doubling up on your free time.
yeah yeah man, that's what it is. So I think I played for like 3 hours one night, and I was listening, you know, like 1.5 or 1.75 speed or something. So I
Yeah.
made some more progress than I think I thought I made that night.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, to you, the listeners slash viewers, feel free to give us feedback either in the comments or on our Discord. our Fantology Discord. We love to hear what you think. We love to hear your corrections too. And I'm gonna go before I die. So
All right, thanks, Ryan.
yeah, talk to you later.
Bye.